believe the risk to our infrastructure, water supply, energy grid, is greater than 50% in the US?
I think if it came down to a conflict, yes. Yeah, I think we'd be the first thing targeted. We have not prepared ourselves enough for the digital world. The critical infrastructure, if our energy grid goes down, it creates mass panic. It's a very real worry. What if all of our networks go down? Everyone that relies on communications, they're all targets, and terrible things could happen. And you can see some horrific consequences.
Welcome to Disruptor Confessions. I'm your host, John Ayers. This is the second part in a two-part series with cybersecurity expert Chuck Brooks. Please be sure to watch the first episode. Chuck, global threats, existential cybersecurity, AI warfare, nation-state threats, quantum risk, the new battleground. In the first part, we talked a little bit more about the individual, myself, employees, employers, small businesses, the general public, the 80%, the listeners. In this second part, I really want to get into some of these areas of AI warfare. The part of the conversations inside the conversations you're having that I might not be privy to, our listeners might not be aware of. More national security, more around public threat, where society might be at risk and vulnerable. On that level, what's the broader fear you have around the global security or government security risk?
I think the biggest risk is still critical infrastructure. A lot of this we have, particularly I'm going by the United States of it, was built 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. If you look at the energy grid, there's really three parts to the grid, but a lot of it's ancient and built on legacy systems and, regulated by utilities, et cetera, different ownership, private government, state, individuals. Matter of fact, most of the private critical infrastructure in the United States is owned by private sector. You're seeing a lot of attacks recently on water treatment plants. You've seen a bunch of them on energy. You've seen it pretty much on every critical infrastructure, whether it be finance, health. And these are by state sponsors, basically testing us. And they've taken down, if you look back a couple of years ago, they took down a lot of part of Baltimore, part of Atlanta, state and local, which don't have cyber defense capabilities. So we're sitting in a nation. Again, as I mentioned, it's not one monolithic security where it's all fragmented, and certain sectors have more capabilities, certain sectors have none. And so, particularly in the state and local, they don't have the resources and the monies and budgets. They're sitting ducks for a lot of this. So I worry that the next level of warfare could be used against that. And if you look at it in the Ukraine conflict, you saw that Russia did a lot of attacks on the banking systems and the network in Ukraine. Luckily, they were somewhat prepared for it, and United States and UK and others were helping them. But they also hijacked the Ukrainian satellite, and so they've shown ability to go beyond just going to buildings and networks. So I fear that we're looking at now where a lot of our satellites, there's like 10,000 of them up there in orbit now, owned by the private sector. They don't have cybersecurity measures on them. Ground stations don't have a lot of the cybersecurity measures. Relay stations also. We're starting to look at that and say, okay, we need this drastically. And there's executive orders now trying to bolster that. But I think, we have not prepared ourselves enough for the digital world. And if you look back just a few years ago, we have the capabilities too. So I think that's the reason why a lot of our adversaries are reluctant to go after the United States. We have a tremendous offensive capability too. We demonstrated we took out the whole Iranian port a few years ago. I don't know if you remember that when they fired on some of our sailors. We just basically blacked out their whole port and all their electrical, everything around there, production, energy. So we have the ability to do that too. We have the ability to get into the adversarial systems. What we do is we can't control the plausible deniability of a lot of the groups that they use, where they're throwing automated bots at us and ransomware. Like I said, a lot of these organized crime groups. So I worry about that element too. So that the strategic ecosystem has changed that way. The harder part now is as I said, plausible deniability is discovering who is behind things and how they camouflage it, and also then prosecuting them, which is very difficult to do because you have to have cooperation to prosecute a lot of these criminals, and they won't, because they're hiding in these countries that are actually doing it. So it's a really a sort of a scary strategic scenario, and I think there's been a lot more attention paid to it. I see in the Pentagon, the Cyber Command was created a few years ago. Most of the military now is being trained. Some of the best cyber people are coming out of the military now because they realize that, their whole networks could be compromised if they don't have security when they're doing reconnaissance, when they're launching missiles, when they're flying aircraft or using robots and drones, which are, much cheaper and in some cases much more capable now in urban warfare scenarios. So you're seeing a whole different network of capabilities being integrated into strategic defense and military operations.
So when I think about warfare and some of the bigger threats from a geopolitical landscape, I think of Ukraine war, I think of robots and drones, that sort of thing. I love your conversation around infrastructure, because to me that also is super concerning. You take down a water system, you take down electricity, a grid, changes everything in a matter of hours, certainly days. You mentioned something also about satellites. I think 10,000 or more satellites in orbit. How vulnerable are we at that layer in terms of cyber risk?
Well, most of them don't have the capacity. They don't have a lot of what you'd find in most ground capabilities, but they're still very difficult to locate and attack a satellite unless you have a satellite up there, which has been done, by the way, or tested. So they're really attacking mostly the relay stations and the ground stations where the telemetry is done and all the information is. But we're very vulnerable there. Luckily, I think the Department of Homeland Security did a working group, which I was part of a couple of years ago, recognizing the threat to space. And they've implemented a lot of changes with the civilian sector. And I think the military sector has its own rules and capabilities, and they hardened stuff earlier. And most of the military satellites are separate, but they also borrow space on commercial satellites too. A lot of the sensing we're doing, from weather to looking at trends, communications, is done now by satellites more and more. We're a spacefaring world. So I think those vulnerabilities need to be mitigated and our security bolstered in satellites. And I think that's some of the messaging coming out of industry and government right now.
This may be no better time than now to ask. Individuals, I heard recently, I think ChatGPT has like 800 million users, Gemini. The individuals are adopting AI. Companies are bringing it in. Government just seems slower to the take. How is this partnership between the government and private sector happening? What's your take on that in this security risk area?
Yeah, no, you're right. I think inherently government's always going to be slower. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of procurement rules, regulation rules, and also they don't necessarily work together, different agencies, as we found out in 9/11, but also they have their different networks and different systems, different encryption. And DOD is its own entity, or Department of War now, it's its own entity. So yes, government is different in that sense. However, there's been an ongoing private partnership, and it's being cultivated now to do research and development on AI and on quantum, those two areas by the administration and supported by Congress. So I think you're seeing that a lot of the innovation really comes from smaller companies or even the big companies in the private sector. And it's done at universities, et cetera. So it can react. Their government labs and other things that are amazing too. Los Alamos and ORNL and all these have great brains. But I think you need it all. I think you need cooperation. It's collective. And it's not just the United States. It should be our allies global too, where some of them have amazing innovative capabilities.
Well, I ask about the government and private sector partnership, because I know where Elon Musk has been going with a lot of satellites. I believe Jeff Bezos is certainly looking into it. There's a lot of kind of crossover here. Is space needing to be a critical infrastructure?
Well, that was a dilemma, right? The group recommended that it be the critical infrastructure. And the debate was, well, it's already part of other infrastructures, so it doesn't need to be its own. But I do think, personally, it should be. I think there's a separation of resources that go into it. Obviously, there's NASA, but there's a lot of other private entities too involved in it, and the Department of Defense, intelligence community, et cetera. I think it needs to be, because we're so dependent on our communications now with satellites and in verification areas that needs to be considered critical infrastructure. Whether it happens or not, we'll see.
Chuck, I worry about our water system being polluted, electrical grid being brought down, but I don't think about satellites. Not to be a doomsdayer, but like if satellites were to be taken out, how many would need to be taken out? What would be kind of the impact? How would we feel it?
Well, interesting enough, they could be taken out kinetically or, through attacks. There could be a lot of ways to take them out. We would feel it significantly, though that would be if they were taken out, that would be basically a World War III scenario, right? So that would have to be someone with the capability of Russia or China to be able to do that. I don't think that'll happen because they're just as vulnerable. It's sort of like a mutual assured destruction out there. And there's also cooperation. So we're exploring space together in a lot of areas, all those countries. So it's a scary scenario. And I think they're building redundancy is really what they're doing. If something happens, because not only necessarily satellites, sometimes just things happen, space debris, solar flares, etc. They drop. A lot of the young must fell. So that happens when we don't have total control of it. You have the elements. And so you need redundancy. So redundancy is really the best answer to that. And you have backups also on the ground.
Chuck, what is the Genesis mission? What do you know about it?
Really what it is, and I say it like a Manhattan type project. AI is a lot of, it's not monolithic. There's a lot of different aspects to AI. And what they're doing is the government has invited the best minds from the best companies, of course, the big, large ones out there, but a lot of smaller ones too, to work together to develop both capabilities and policies of how to steer ourselves into the next AI world as AI continues to grow and use and obviously and capability and achieve more toward general intelligence. There's a lot of minds out there that things we need to look at this in a very serious way and throw a lot of resources at it. And I think that's the crux of the Genesis mission. And I welcome it. I think it's something like that we should have been doing years ago with all these emerging technologies, because it becomes less of a race than in a security sense if you're already working on it or discovering it. It have many benefits too, to healthcare, particularly to drug discovery, to biotech, to material sciences.
Is the fox in the hen house? Let me explain what I'm thinking. I want to be careful of being too political on this conversation, but when you have OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and all the leaders, the top 7, the big 10 tech companies who are driving most of the stock market, you have them collaborating with our federal government in the US. Is that the fox in the hen house, or is that what we need? We simply have to work that way.
Well, it's a little bit of both. We definitely need them. I mean, there's no one else. I mean, they're the ones that are basically the pioneers in this, and they're creating these opportunities. So we have to work with them. And it's not just us. We're working against what the Chinese are doing and others are doing that may threaten us. So we need their ingenuity. We need their adventurism. So yes, it's true. They get a lot of benefits. They allow to get government contracts, and they know what's going on with opportunities. But that's no different than the defense establishment for the last 50 years. The big defense people are the same way. They're helped doing that too. So it's not really a change. But then you look at now the Dow. These companies are really basically leading the markets. So where else do you go to? And when they have trillion-dollar companies, like Google and NVIDIA and others like that, you need them at the table, and you need IBM, even the ones that have been around for a while too. You need all of their ingenuity. So I guess it's true they're in the head house, but we need them.
That's how I think about it, and I kind of come alongside you. It is a little bit of both. We need them, and I fear that, but I also see the value. It is critical. Taking it out of the U.S., we're a global kind of podcast, so we have listeners from around the world. We've had guests from around the world. I want to ask you about where our footing is in the U.S. We mentioned the Genesis mission that was announced recently. We have our companies out of Silicon Valley, most out of Silicon Valley, and really driving much of this in the U.S. We have to work with partners, with the EU and others. But are we working collaboratively across the globe with other Western nations who have similar beliefs?
Oh, we are, and I say there is government cooperation, but I think really more of it's on the private sector, and also in universities and labs. A lot of them are global. They're working seriously with Europe, seriously with UAE, Israel. Huge amount of investment going in there in chips. With Japan, a lot of robotics. They still lead in robotics in the world. And in Taiwan too, also a lot of electronic capabilities there too. So there's more and more of that. Sometimes it gets caught up in the news and this tariff stuff, but really that's not really the overall relationship. I mean, it's all about discovery, and particularly with scientists, they're always looking for new venues and capabilities to work together. I think more and more we're going to have to work together, and we'll see where it goes. But because it's always the small business or a lab or some academic that makes a breakthrough. That's where it comes from. Innovation comes often from the people that are risk takers.
Has China or Russia or other adversaries surpass the US in cyber warfare?
I would say no with China. We're seeing a lot of it. I mean, with Russia, we're seeing a lot of it with Ukraine. It's been testing ground. We're seeing their capabilities. They've always been pretty good, but we understand how they operate. And China has devoted a lot of resources and a lot of their military into cyber in the last decade, and it's made huge growth. So we always looked at them as being able to copy everything. Now they're building their own stuff, and their AI is capable. The problem is there's no way to really verify all of its capabilities. But I would not underestimate China. They have a lot of great minds there. I would not underestimate Russia, too. I think the biggest thing you can do that to be the downfall is underestimate people that are competing with you. They have capability. I mean, this is coding, a lot of it. It's not, necessarily, building an atomic bomb. It's working with computers. So it's a different arena, and there's a lot of capability out there. But I think where our fear is quantum. I think that we've been negligent on a lot of the quantum area, and China has been really focused heavily on quantum entanglement, quantum communications, all those areas.
I read about quantum. It's still a little bit outside my wheelhouse. Can you bring it down to my level, to our listeners' level? Help us understand what quantum is, and especially quantum in the areas of cybersecurity.
Usually when you do computing, it's X's and O's. It's a simple mechanism. You're limited how many operations you can do at once. So it's binary. What happens with quantum, to put it in sort of layman's terms, they use qubits that can exist in two places at once and can do different things at once. So it can do X's and O's at the same time. It can do other things. So there's no limitations basically on the speed of where they can calculate in a very simplistic way. So in terms of computing, it puts it on a new level. And there's different types of computing too. Everyone thinks of the 2000 qubit computer, which all the big guys are working on, and they're making breakthroughs on every day. And that's the supercomputer, the gateway computer for quantum computing that will have like superpowers. But there's already quantum algorithms. There's photonics, which is another area where it's still based on particle physics and using light photonics to basically do calculations. There's also chemical and biological computing. But photonics is already, quantum photonics is already there. There are a couple companies, one called Quantum Computing Inc., that's really putting out chips already and doing actual user-capable computers for this. It's all called annealing area for quantum. So I think this is going to, before we hit the big one, which is the gateway, there's going to be a roll-up of all these different capabilities. And they're also going to integrate with classical computer, what we have now. So it's not just going to be all or nothing. You'll have a combination of quantum and classical computing, supercomputing. All of these different capabilities will be used. So it's going to basically then be fused with AI. When you take that with quantum with AI, you build a superpower. And so you get the ability to pull in all data at once and almost instantaneously and do all these calculations instantaneously, and then have AI analysis in there too. So it's going to really be, I guess, what the definition of disruptive would be.
Well, let me ask you on that. I think earlier you mentioned Q day. I'm assuming Q as in quantum, correct?
Yes. Q day is what they're saying is when one and they're assuming it's China. If they get it ahead of us, they'll have the ability to decrypt all the data out there and also have the power to a superpower in terms of development, understanding of all kinds of industries and capabilities that they can transition for economic power. So they would be dominating the world. Now, it could be that the U.S. and the West get it too, or it could be simultaneously. Q-Day is a real thing, but I think there are plenty of computing capabilities and data that are not accessible, that have quantum proof or quantum resistant applications that are now being mandated by government that would not be able to pull up that data. So I think the more we transition over to protecting and encrypting our data, the less of a risk Q-Day will be.
Chuck, I listened to a lot of thought leaders in the space, and some of those leading some of the companies that we're talking about, Demis Hassabis, Dario Amodei, Jeffrey Hinton, and others who I think are leading with a very strong concern about the risk. And some say that AGI, ASI could come within the next 5 years or so. First of all, do you kind of buy into the AGI, ASI kind of terminology? And do you think it's going to come within the next 5 years or so?
I think we're still very early on. We're nowhere near the capacity and capability of the human brain right now in computing. So I think that may be at some point an issue, but I don't think we're anywhere near that, even though a lot of futurists are saying we're getting closer to it and it's going to happen. But we're still basically using computing, which is mostly machine learning, right? So with more and more context toward a sort of reasoning now. So we still have a long way to go to get there. But I think with agents, it's really also not just the agents controlling; it's all about augmenting human capabilities. So there's not all doom and gloom. You could take a lot of artificial intelligence agents and better way you're doing things and use them for if you're running a business, if you're travel agents or whatever you want to do, and have all the information done for you to accentuate your capabilities and whatever you're doing as a business. So I think it's augmenting the human. I think there's some interesting companies like Clover that are focused on that. So I think that's a real possibility too. And then I think where we're more likely go, and you're seeing this now, is neuromorphic computing, and that's really where they're now connecting electrodes and other things into the brain and able to download thoughts and back and forth. I think you're going to see a combination of cyborg-like capabilities where they'll be able to download languages into your brain thoughts and at some point find the places in your brain that can have the capacity to absorb this. It's been a lot of futuristic movies, but I think we're closer to that. And they've demonstrated in some of this now of getting people to be able to use thoughts to be able to move their limbs that are quadriplegics. So I think that sort of combination of mixing the human and the machine will be a reality sooner than later.
Does AGI, this artificial general intelligence, does that come before Q Day, quantum day?
I think quantum will come first. Quantum day, Q Day will come first. Again, I mean, there's a lot of people that think that AGI, artificial general intelligence, will basically be, we have a computer that can mimic in its entirety the capability of a brain. And we haven't come to that point yet, but we've mapped the brains and done stuff. And we haven't had the ability for there's debates whether computers can think for themselves. And so what we do know is that they can replicate themselves. And so I think that they'll be programmed enough to be able to develop and replicate computers, so create themselves at some point. But then maybe you just unplug them, right? Yeah.
That is kind of the conversation many people have. Well, can't you just unplug this? But what I understand is it's just not possible anymore. It's just such a dispersed system.
Yeah, it's a dispersed system, and also battery lives now are a growing capability and definitely mobile capability. So what could happen is, and it would be almost suicidal, is an electronic magnetic pulse, which is being used in warfare scenarios where you explode a bomb over an area and it takes out all the electronics and capabilities. That would be basically a worst case scenario, but it's a real threat actually now to the United States and other countries right now. EMP, and it's not just from exploding bombs over that would take out. It would be potentially a solar flare or something that happens on the sun called the Carrington effect, which happened back in the 1920s, where it took out all our nascent electronics, which has fried them. So EMP is also something that's being looked at in security circles, and a lot of buildings already have it, particularly in the military, in case something like that does happen. But every car would be useless. Every computer would be useless in this scenario. So if they had a big brother and AGI taking over the world, that may be the way to take it out.
So the way this goes back to who's leading these kind of efforts around quantum and AGI. We're definitely in a new era. I think it's coming faster. The pace of it is much faster than any of us. Certainly I believed, and I think even the leaders who are driving it, when you watch Demis Hassabis and some of the others I mentioned, I think they're seeing it on track of what they were predicting, but very few did. Are there some in China or in Russia or other countries that we might not be working with as closely as we could or should? Are there people in those countries who are cautious, or are they just running forward? Are we in an AI race? Are we in a cybersecurity threat race? Where do you see that?
Well, inherently, China and Russia don't play by the same rules, and they're not concerned about the future of AI escaping and doing other things for society. They're looking at their own terms of how it will benefit them. So they have done that with everything. They've always addressed in terms of technology. It's not the risk to humanity. It's how it'll better their capabilities strategically. So I think that element is different from where the West looks at it, where they've already had basically legislation in Europe to address regulatory issues with AI, just similar to GDPR. And also in the United States, there's been talk about how you do governance on AI. That is a much more difficult problem because this is the private sector. How do you put limitations and regulate the private sector in this area that government doesn't understand at all? And, they don't understand cybersecurity, let alone artificial intelligence. So you don't have the technological know-how inside government to draft legislation and incorporate it. And also get the buy-in, because we're a global country as well as the U.S. A lot of our companies operate not just in the United States, all over the world. And so it's a difficult area. It's difficult to rein in. So governance is something we need, but it'll probably come slowly. And it'll probably come just like, with cyber, when something happens bad, then you need, regulations kind of thing. But right now they all talk about it and theorize about it and doomsday about it, but nothing is really quite happening to stop it.
Are democratic nations inherently behind because of our concern and regulations? How do you see that?
Well, it's inhibiting in some areas, but I think the ingenuity of the West, and I hope it continues, has always been just like how we built the bomb and Manhattan Project, et cetera. We have great minds. They're allowed to think freely and do things under auspices of government, industry, academia. And that's always been our strength in the West, our innovation. And regulatory issue can impede it possibly, but I think we've always overcome it. I think that the way that our adversaries have always looked at it is a much more less adventuresome way. They're always looking in terms of how it's going in a straight line rather than exploring all the different aspects that may make us, bring innovation. And so I don't know if that's changed with China. Again, they're putting a lot of resources in, but they still have a sort of a group mentality. We're more individual as a capitalist society, where we have a lot of great minds and innovation that come out of nowhere that are able to do things that no one else is able to do.
We're kind of merging this conversation with AI and cyber, but they are kind of being interwoven, are they not?
They're interwoven in capabilities, no doubt about it. I mean, you're operating on a digital environment, so you need security, and cybersecurity is part of everything. And AI is an enabler. It's a tool for everything. And in any industry you can think of, in dealing with digital, it's certainly part of it now.
The regulations in Europe, GDPR came out in 2018. I happen to be in California, CCPA. So when you have regulations around data privacy, I get that. The regulations that are starting to happen around AI in Europe, I'm hearing pushback from US, and they're saying, well, that slows us down. You can't place those kind of heavy restrictions and regulations on it. I'm concerned about regulations more around security. Where does this take us around these very existential threats, Chuck, when we have infrastructure at risk, not just in the US, but globally? How does that play out?
Well, again, that's something that they're looking at, right? And now they have chief artificial intelligence officers in the federal government. DOD has it. I think transportation has it. Commerce has it. DHS is bringing them in. They're looking at how the AI will impact productivity and security. And so they're looking at these issues in a serious way. Again, the problem is it takes a lot of resources, and they're happening so rapidly. It's not easy to address, and there's people turnover, personnel turnover. But I worry about it too. And, I think that, it's difficult to control. When you get technology, we were able to control nuclear because we knew the limitations of it. We knew that very few could do it. But everyone has access now to AI. And so you can't control everyone with access. And you can't control every country. So it's a different kind of component in security minds, because anyone that has a computer could be out there doing something. And so it's a different kind of element than nuclear.
Do we need a cybersecurity mission?
Absolutely. And they're always talking about the cybersecurity moonshot. It's never really happened, but they talk about it. And, it's largely because in the U.S., you almost need a constituency to push it. I mean, there are a lot of cyber firms that would probably welcome that opportunity, I think, now. But it's never really pushed as a policy in a strong enough way. I think we definitely need it. And I think it's not just the United States, it's our allies. I think we really need to look at it. And there are a lot of capable tools out there too. It's not a one element thing. It involves a lot of orchestration of a lot of components, from endpoints, from networks, to people, to data, to encryption, to resilience, to incident response. So it's difficult to have, a one sort of a linear focus on what cybersecurity is and those things. But I think just the discussion and the collaboration, and I still think DHS should probably be the leader of this, would be a great thing, just like Genesis mission. I think we need it in cyber, and I think we need it in quantum, because those three pillars, I think, are going to be the focus of the next 2 decades to come, at least.
Do we have anything close to that right now? Anything, like you mentioned DHS, do we have anything that's close to this?
Well, CISA is supposed to be a lot of what happens with cyber, but a lot of that is identifying threats and sharing information. It's not really cultivating new technologies and merging. They rely on the private sector to do that mostly, and then we bid and do procure things like that. But what you're talking about is really bringing the best minds from academia, industry, and government, bringing them together and collectively coming up with solutions, looking at what maybe they're forging, what technologies we already have, but also looking for new capabilities and how to leverage other technologies to make it there, like AI, like quantum. So I think something like that is not happening yet.
I bring it up because I'm seeing in the new world that we're living in, that it was released here in the last few years since ChatGPT launched in this generative AI era, we're now seeing 20-something starting companies, $1 billion of investment, and they're just moving at just like an exponential rate. And government just can't keep up with that. So I fear the worst. I fear that regulations, government oversight is going to fall so far behind at the pace of change that we're experiencing. So what might that look like? What might a cybersecurity government entity look like, Chuck?
Yeah. Well, I think you'd have it more like the Genesis Project would be, would be a collective effort, not to dictate, but to discover and collaborate. And I think that's what needs to be done. What's working, where we can share information, what we can do to better harden our defenses, what we can do to protect the data. Look at all those elements, what we have for networks, and where we could share with the more vulnerable entities of our critical infrastructure and healthcare, et cetera, and do it that way without so much, each industry has its own regulations, whether you're looking at nuclear utilities or manufacturing, they have a lot of NIST things to follow and a lot of other things. That's already out there. And so that the regulatory items are there, but I think it's not enough to equip us with dealing with the new world, with a lot of the mixtures of operational technology and IT and AI and quantum now joining. So we have to look at things differently.
So a cybersecurity mission, if you will. You mentioned infrastructure, resources, different industries, healthcare. Do you think this consortium of sorts, do you think they could come together with a top 10 priority list?
Oh, I think they would. I think that there's been a couple commissions that have done similar things to this. The question is how they implement them, and I think they could easily. And I think it doesn't hurt to be redundant. Again, people have to discover and listen. And if you're looking at a legislative branch, again, you have a huge curve to educate them on these things. So yes, I think that's going to be very valuable. They would come up with a lot of good recommendations, particularly now because they have a lot of great minds out there with a lot of experience in the CISO world and other world, where lessons learned can be really applied.
Well, as we start to wrap up here, Chuck, I want to ask you a couple of questions. If a government entity right now were to prioritize a list of cyber threats in your mind, what would you put at the top 3 concerns you have as the biggest risks in cyber?
Obviously, the deep fakes, business compromise, because it's something that's grown in capability so quick that we're not equipped to basically deal with it. And it's already been used, to defraud people. And we need to do catch up on that. The second one I'd probably put in is a lot of these AI-enabled bots, which are just being produced at thousands at a time. They go off and do their own thing through agentic AI. They're already revitalizing a lot of the DDoS attacks, the distributed now service attacks that have been quiet for a few years are now coming back because they're able to do it so easily. And then again, the whole idea of being able to be resilient and protect yourself, what you need for encryption, what you need to stop ransomware attacks and phishing, et cetera. Those 3 areas probably make sense. They touch most of the population.
I'll ask you the question, what keeps you up at night? In this way, what is the worst case scenario in your mind? I wake up tomorrow and cyber threat really just takes over the earth. What do you worry about, Chuck?
I think it's really the critical infrastructure. I think if our energy grid goes down, that means basically food, everything else. It creates mass panic. It's a very real worry. Also with healthcare. I mean, I think there's been a lot of attacks on healthcare. We've been so far resilient, luckily. But what if a couple of hospital systems are taken down in a big way? That would create panic too. I think I'm more worried about the panic and the people that would go out and do stuff because they don't know what's going to happen. They loot stores, do whatever. If we're thrown into darkness, we've seen what happens when we have blackouts. What if all of our networks go down? Everyone that's shopping, everyone that relies on communications, we've seen elements of that, not a huge incident yet.
Well, and I think we've witnessed this. I actually happened to live in the Caribbean for years and went through a hurricane, went without power for 3 months. So I saw it on that scale. We see that when we see large storms like hurricanes and that sort of thing, where power goes out, water is short. But I'm thinking more, as you mentioned, infrastructure across an entire nation.
Yes.
How real is that threat, Chuck? Would you give that a 10% chance, a 50%? Like, how real is that threat?
Well, it's probably more than a 50% chance if you're looking at a conflict, but also not just conflict. There are a lot of capabilities out there now that are not state sponsored that can do a lot of damage. And like I said, a lot of our infrastructure is old, legacy systems, not built for security in mind. They're trying to catch up in some areas. Some are better than others, but in manufacturing is another one. They're all targets, and it's just too easy to be target nowadays. And if they don't put resources and efforts and capabilities and bring on the expertise, terrible things could happen. With AI enabled and with these phishing attacks multiplied by maybe even millions and automated with polymorphic warfare, malware, you can see some horrific consequences.
You believe the risk to our infrastructure, water supply, energy, grid, is greater than 50% in the US?
I think if it came down to a conflict, yes. Yeah, I think we'd be the first thing targeted.
Because we have old infrastructure.
We have old infrastructure, mostly by the private sector. It impacts everybody. It can put a nation in its knees, particularly if we're attacked by a non-nuclear nation. It's sort of under the radar kind of thing without using nuclear weapons. But I think we're getting prepared for that. I think what's keeping this from happening is our own capabilities to do this to other countries. That's why I worry more something from like an Iran or a North Korea type country.
And that has to be handled in a private public sector kind of way, like we were discussing, correct?
Correct.
At the enterprise level, at the large corporation, not the small, medium business size, but at the large corporation, what industries are most vulnerable?
Well, traditionally, it's been healthcare just because they use disparate networks. You have the doctors, the nurses, the devices, the patients, the administration. So it gives a lot of avenues. And also, a hacker's been very good at using a ransomware attacks on them, and they've paid. So they're always at risk. But finance is still the number one attack, and they're hitting not necessarily the big banks, which are able to absorb a lot of these, thousands of attacks they get a day. But, like the financial planners, the people that work with a lot of the financial industry, people below at the smaller banks, they're subject to attacks. And the third one, believe it or not, is education. I mean, education, colleges and universities and even K through 12 have all been, very behind the curve when it comes to attack. One college went down to business, Lincoln College in Illinois, from an attack they've been around for 100 years, and they took them out for ransomware attack. So I think a lot of them are trying to now react to that. Big universities now got a lot of processes in place, but it's difficult with students. And then you talk about different departments. You're talking about the energy, the sanitation, the food, the buildings. It's not easy. So there's too many vulnerabilities, too many gaps to try and close quickly.
I just expect government and private sector to figure out the big things. It's too big. I can't do something about it. I also expect companies that I'm either doing business for or with, I'm a customer of that company. I expect them to have that in place. Let me put you as CEO. You're CEO of a massive global financial institution or a large scale healthcare operator. Tomorrow, you go into your security officer. What are the 3 questions you ask your security officer as a CEO of a large company?
Where's our data held? How is it backed up? Is it accessible to a potential attacks? And once you get that down, you could devise a strategy around it. But also, you want to know where, what training you have in your network. What do you have for resilience, incident response? Because I think incident response is probably more of a priority now for most big companies because they realize something's going to happen, whether it's a human error or even misconfiguration or a cyber attack that could take their whole networks down. And this happened. It's happened routinely. So I think resilience is really important. What do you need? Who does what? How we get back on track? I think that's really where companies are looking at, because they can't stop everything. It's impossible. They should have the best technologies, yes, and their tools. But there's always a human error possibility. There's always an overlooked something that happens. And so I would look at, those elements first.
So data, training, response, resilience, those areas?
Yeah, I think you got to do what you can control, right? And you can always control the data. You
You
can
almost
segment
said it.
it. Yeah.
You almost said it as it's not if, it's when.
It's happened already. Like I said, a lot of companies have been hit. And a lot of them have adopted resilient policies already. I mean, SolarWinds, for one, they were one of the first to get hit, and they found that there are bad guys in their network, but they prudently adapted, a zero trust model and did other things to get around it and change their posture. But who knows how many other networks are corrupted out there? And we have, unfortunately, some bad examples like Colonial Pipeline where they didn't know if it was OT or IT. So they took down all the OT at the same time. So the whole East Coast energy networks were useless. Yeah, I think these big companies really have to, first of all, do more than just compliance, but actually look at cybersecurity as a vital component of how they operate. And I think they should be required to do, just like we require, vendors to do what they're working with DoD or DHS to have certain capabilities and understanding of cyber. These companies should have CISOs and CIOs and people in there in place that have a total understanding of the responsibilities and capabilities of their companies.
Let's go into a quick round. We're coming into a new year, 2026. What's the biggest cyber threat of 2026 in your mind?
Still phishing. I think it's just because of AI enabled, too prevalent, too easy to do for even someone that's not even sophisticated to be able to get into a network. Until you can stop that, that's still the main cause. Insider threats, another second cause, which is usually negligence, not just hostile employees. You can mitigate some of that with AI now. You can, like I said, watch the behavioral analytics and make sure that, if you're a CISO, that there's no open gates there. But those two areas are still the biggest challenge for cyber.
What nation do you think you're most concerned about bringing on a potential cyber conflict?
Oh, China. They have the most capabilities. They're also very focused on procuring strategic minerals that are used in electronics and in all these areas for computing. So I think Russia's got its hands full with Ukraine, and China is right now the most capable adversary out there.
I know you're probably going to respond AI to this next question, but I'm going to ask you to be a little bit more specific. What technology will be weaponized most in 2026?
I think, the basically offensive cyber is being weaponized. You don't hear about it a lot, but it is already being weaponized and probably more weaponized with these new capabilities of AI. But I think if you look at any weapon, now the AI is being built into it, particularly drone warfare. What you see right now is the ability for someone to be at a distance and operate a drone and take out a plane or tank. Pretty remarkable, some of the stuff that I've watched between the last two conflicts with Ukraine taking out basically deep into Soviet space, Russian space, a whole series of planes with drones, and also Israel with what they did with drone warfare and robotic warfare.
So you mentioned China as a nation threat. I've heard that China is literally milliseconds behind us in terms of like reaching AGI. So I've kind of concur with you on that. In terms of like technology, like threat, I'll defer to you on that. Let me flip that. Where do you think technology can save us in 2026?
And threat detection, like I said, that there's benefits of AI too. And one of the immediate benefits is right now is that it's speed to incident. It used to be that you'd have to rely on analysts to do stuff, and it might take hours or days. Now, automated threat detection and analytics can do this in minutes. So I think there's that ability. It's also for discovery and gaps, know where your gaps are, and to automate a lot of the detection capabilities inside your networks. So AI is a dual application. The problem, again, is that it's a have and have not situation. A lot of companies just can't afford it or understand. More likely not understand how to apply AI and which AI to use. So you have the major corporations with resources, testing and using AI in good ways. But maybe set an example, and then so my suggestion to those other companies is get managed services, get groups that understand the threats and know how to use and implement and orchestrate your capabilities for what your potential threats are, because not everyone's threats are the same. So I think that's how AI will be used in a defensive purpose and cyber, and then also for obviously all kinds of industries for discovery, drug discovery, material science that's being used, architecture, engineering, everything AI touches, it has capabilities for doing good too.
You touch on some pretty heavy topics. You've got these 4+ decades. I think you said you're traveling around the world speaking to companies and government entities. Chuck, when I think about this in the world that you live in, What do you hope you're wrong about in terms of your prediction and some of the concerns you have? Where do you think you might be predicting something and you hope you are wrong?
Well, I'm hoping that big hack that doesn't take down critical infrastructure doesn't happen. Where actually our energy grid is put at risk, or our health networks, or even our banks. We've had incidents already recently where banks have gone down. You've seen your account dwindle to nothing, and that's actually happened. So with a series of banks this year. So I'm hoping that we have the ability to protect ourselves better than I think we do, and I hope I'm wrong in a lot of these vulnerabilities that are not exploited. So I'm hoping in that area, and I'm hoping that our adversaries don't get quantum and capability before we do. I think we will get it before then.
Well, on that term of hope, what gives you hope? It does seem a little bit concerning, to say the least. What gives you hope?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about AI is it's also an educational tool. It's able to pull from all these data sets and bring people information they didn't have in years in the past. It's like an encyclopedia in your ear, and you have those abilities. I'm hoping that we can learn and steer technology for good in schools and rebuild our engineering capability in the United States, and understand that there's a lot of benefits of technology. And we're testing a lot in robotics and other things, and augmenting biotechnology areas and health, and particularly in those areas, agriculture, Internet of Things in agriculture. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that we can use technology for the benefit of humans. So I think that we need to get the discussion out front, though. So we actually have these areas being prioritized by both government and industry.
So we'll wrap up here, but before we do, one question. I'm going to ask it in three different areas, if you will, of areas that we've already talked about. If you were to tell governments, country leaders, one thing they should be doing right now, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell right now, I think quantum's nearby, that you need quantum resistant algorithms and encrypt your data, because that's something that's very doable. And the US is requiring it now on all vendors with DoD or Department of War. I think that's a very easy thing for people to do, to be able to encrypt themselves, whether it be lattice or polymorphic or whatever kind of encryption you use, but make it quantum resistant. So that's a simple thing that countries can do, and companies can do. The other thing, look at particularly AI. So I tell my students often that it's not going to a chat GPT or another platform. It's a question of how you can take these capabilities these platforms give you, know which platform does what, how you use it for your company, how you use it for, if you're in government, how you can better use it. So you're still going to need the human element to understand the implications of technologies and oversight of it, and benefits. So someone that's conversant and understanding that in the cybersecurity requirements is going to have a lot of more potential in the environment we're going into right now, which is moving much more farther away from the physical job to the digital jobs.
So on the government level, you're saying get into quantum algorithmics, and for the US, launch a Genesis mission for cyber.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah.
And on the
both of them are in early stages, but get on board.
On the business side, on the corporate level, enterprise industry, especially in the regulated of financial services or healthcare, what would you tell them? Similar?
Similar. I also tell them to do the basics, understand that, you have requirements, obviously, with health records and things like that. But I'd say understand there's new threats out there. So you need to enhance your cybersecurity defenses, and you need to have more resilience. So I think those two areas go hand in hand.
Yep.
So I would tell them that, look out there, what's out there, use your CISOs, be able to understand what technologies work best for them, how they can implement it, and also educate your workforce. So that would be my recommendation to them. With quantum and AI, I mean, you're just going to, maybe bring out a quantum risk officer, a chief risk officer that understands, quantum technologies, AI technologies, and cyber technologies. I think you need to be conversant of where the industries are going and what breakthroughs are being made, which are daily. So it's very difficult to track. So I think the successful companies will do that and lead the way. And they are doing, NVIDIA is obviously doing that, and others are doing that, and Google. But I think small businesses need to do it too.
On the individual level, myself, our listeners, what should I be doing? What should our listeners be doing?
Definitely multi-factor authentication. Do what you can do, strong passwords. Be careful where you go when you're clicking on something and where you visit, and make sure you have the right security on your devices, and make sure you understand what the threats are, where you use them too.
Chuck, if people want to find you, want to learn more about you, want to follow you, where do they keep track of what Chuck Brooks is doing online?
LinkedIn has really been my where my portfolio is, and where I publish a lot of my articles on that. Then I publish in Forbes and others. I always share them on LinkedIn. It seems that during COVID, a lot of people went to LinkedIn, a lot of businesses, government. Anyone is on there now. It's pretty much everybody. I think there's over 1 billion users. So LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me, and I'll respond.
Are we going to be okay, Chuck, in the next few years? Are we going to be okay?
I think we will be okay, but we got to be vigilant, and we got to help lead the way. And I think you can't be complacent, put it that way, because there's always a black swan potential out there, like we found with COVID. And so you have to be careful of what may be out there. Yeah, I think we thought a lot of the scenarios now, so they're really not black swans or gray swans, but we just have to prepare for them.
Thank you so much for the time. It's been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much, Chuck.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Listen, if you enjoyed this show, please subscribe on YouTube, follow, share. Join us on Substack for more Disruptor insights delivered to your inbox. Again, thank you so much for joining.